So the No Internet Dino game that pops up when you open Google Chrome without Wi-Fi is actually pretty similar to another project that I've already made, and that's this Flappy Bird game. And the reason that I say pretty similar is that there's a lot of underlying mechanics that I can use that are exactly the same. So I think we should begin by destroying this bird right here and turning it into a T-Rex. Alright, so this is pretty much as good as we're gonna get it, but our T-Rex doesn't exactly jump through the clouds, so we should probably change the background scenery too. Unlike Flappy Bird, I wanted to make the dinosaur game truly infinite, so rather than creating the entire course, I just made one sliver that we could clone to the rest of the map as the player loaded new areas. So we can start by getting rid of the entire current Flappy Bird board, and now we're ready to begin on the main functionality of our game. Okay, so now we have our first major difference from Flappy Bird, and that's that in Flappy Bird, there's no floor, so the bird can always have no gravity and there won't be any issues. But in the dino game, our dinosaur actually has to land on these blocks, and that's a problem because our dinosaur isn't one entity, so each entity can individually fall down to the floor. So this entity will fall way farther than this entity will because it's already on the floor, which makes our entire dinosaur just squish into a line like that. Now, ordinarily, I would just not have the dinosaur have any no gravity tags so that it just stays floating the entire time. The problem with this is that our dinosaur actually needs to jump, so when it jumps, it needs to fall back down again. And if my memory serves me correctly, you actually need gravity in order to fall. Here's a creeper without gravity to demonstrate what I mean. And as you can see, he just continues to float up indefinitely. Now there's one thing that I think I might just be able to do to avoid having to replicate the entire jumping system with teleports. Hang on, I'm gonna name this guy Stuart. There we go, now I have an actual audience. So Stuart, the thing that I can actually do, look at me while I'm talking to you! As I was saying, rather than keeping it so that the dinosaur has no gravity the entire time that it's in the air, what I can do is I can just remove its no gravity as soon as the bottom armor stand touches the floor. Does that make sense, Stuart? I hope that makes sense. Okay, you're gonna come along with me. And he can just watch us do this project for the rest of the video. Isn't that right, Stuart? So doing that might sound kinda simple, but it's actually a pretty big task because it requires us to make the entire motion and jumping system for our dinosaur. So to give myself a starting point, I've created Ducky's Board of Progress! This was definitely a productive activity and not me procrastinating for 25 minutes. So the first thing that we need to do is to properly align the dino onto the ground of our board. Because in Flappy Bird, it didn't really matter where it spawned, so it kind of spawned in the middle of the air, and if we want to look like this is walking, it has to spawn exactly on top of the sand layer. The next step is to create the teleports that are going to move the dino across our board. And then to control the jumping, we need to run 3 events on the right click. So first, we need to remove the no gravity from our dino. Next, we need to modify the vertical motion of our dino. And finally, we need to add back the gravity once he lands back on the floor so he doesn't just keep falling down infinitely. Okay, Stuart, now that we've got all of this planned out, we can start on the very first sign, which is just to properly align the dino onto the ground. So his current alignment isn't terrible, but I think it could go a little bit further down because his feet are kind of off the floor. So the slime that's pushing the player is being teleported 0.3 blocks every game tick. So if we copy that motion onto our dinosaur, it should hopefully stay right in front of the player at all times. Okay, hopefully this should do the trick. It didn't do any sort of tricks. This is very sad. Okay, hopefully this should fix it. So if I start the function, oh, that is the wrong direction. Hang on. And there we go, he's moving in the correct direction, but it's a little bit too fast. Alright, so I got the movement system fully working, so if I set my FOV to 30, you can see that our dinosaur is basically staying at the exact same spot on our crosshair. So we can check that off, and move on to our next thing, which is to remove the no gravity from the dino when we right click with a carrot on the stick. So because we already have this scoreboard called carrot click, which goes up whenever I right click with a carrot on the stick, all we should need to do is run a command as every motion armor stand and remove its own no gravity tag. So I got pretty sick since the last clip, so it's been a few weeks, and you might still be able to hear it in my voice, but hopefully it's not too bad. Anyway, I did now get that working, which of course means that we can now come over here and check this off. Oop, wrong green. There we go. So now we have to modify the vertical motion of our dinosaur on right click as well. Okay, let's see if this was too much. Oh. What? Stuart, where did you see him? Have you seen him? He's gone. Okay, I somehow managed to modify its position instead of its motion. So rather than setting its vertical motion to 0.5, I just set its vertical position to 0.5. So it ended up at y equals 0.5. Anyway, let's try that again. So now if we right click, there we go. We get a little bit of a jump, but we can definitely go higher than that. Whoa, that's a little too high. Okay, so something in between those two values would be perfect. Okay, I think that's pretty much perfect. So our board of progress has another check, and the last thing that we need to do is add the no gravity back once he's on the floor, and this might be a little bit difficult because we need to check when he's perfectly on the floor. And the problem with this is that Minecraft can only check things 20 times per second. So if in one increment of 20 per second he's up here, and in the next one he's down here, then it would actually stop him when he's in the floor. And yep, it's exactly as I feared, so the dinosaur jumps up, but then gets caught in the ground before it can land. Eventually, I got it working a lot more consistently, and that was the dinosaur's basic motion complete. Thank you very much, Board of Progress, you were extremely helpful. Alright, so next up, I want to make it so that the board continues on this way indefinitely as we generate new areas. So I've specifically created this board so that it's tileable, and what this basically means is that at the start and the end, all the patterns are going to match up perfectly. So as you can see, this is the height, there's about 4 blocks right here, and if we come over to here, there are also 4 blocks right here. So if we align them up next to each other, then it'll match up perfectly and create a continuous hillside. So next up, we need to see how far away from the start we need to be in order to clone this thing. So if we set our FOV to 30 to simulate what it's going to be like in an actual game, then we can see that when my Y value is about, it looks like 45 would be a good place to start cloning it, because immediately after that, we can start seeing the area at the end, which we don't want the player to ever see. And this block is at -4, which means that it's about 50 blocks away from the start that we need to clone the next one. So all we should have to do is summon an entity at the end, and then check if we're 50 blocks away from that entity, then we clone another map. Okay, everything should be set up, but this is the kind of thing that can go very poorly very fast, as I'm cloning large chunks of blocks, so if they clone into the wrong spot, it could sort of ruin my whole world. So I have made a backup, but hopefully nothing goes wrong. So as soon as I reach the right side, it should hopefully clone a new area to the right of me. And there we go, that works like a charm. I'm just gonna check this for a few minutes to make sure that it's all working as I want it to. Okay, so now the cloning system is completely working. So as you can see, I've been testing this a little bit, and this arena now stretches all the way out here, but even once we reach the end, it's still gonna continue cloning itself once we reach this point, if the player were to make it that far. So now we have a fully playable dinosaur game where we can jump and scroll across the screen. So the logical next step is to add some obstacles that the player has to jump over. Now, in the dino game, the 2 main obstacles that the player has to face are vultures and cacti. Obviously, Minecraft doesn't currently have any vultures, so I'm just gonna use the next closest thing, which is a phantom. But I want to do something a little bit different with the cacti, because in real life, cacti have these really cool like spindly bits that come off the end, and in Minecraft, they're just kind of like straight up. So I'm gonna see if I can add those spindly bits with commands, and that could make some cool variation in our cacti. Here are some examples of the cactus shapes that I think I'm going to implement onto the course. And I've used these crimson sprouts to represent a flower on top of the cactus, which I think adds a really nice touch. But for now, I'll just summon an armor stand at the spots where the obstacles will appear afterwards, so that we can start off with just a baseline for where each obstacle is going to be spaced out. Alright, so I now have the spacing system working, so we can see these armor stands spaced apart, which is where our obstacles are going to go. And they're spaced apart a random distance from 15 to 25 blocks, so it looks like these ones are pretty close to 15, and these ones are a lot farther, probably somewhere around 25. And the closer I get to the end, the more armor stands generate, so you can see them just generating along there. And that way we don't have any unnecessary lag by generating too many or more than we need right at the start. So now we can start to add in our cacti onto the course. Now this is going to be difficult because we can't just set block to a cacti, because these are all falling blocks. So you can see they are entities because they have hitboxes. So what this basically means is that we have to create cactus types for each one of these, and then hard-code in the values at where each of the cacti blocks and the little flowers on top are going to be positioned. And then we just set a certain cacti type to where the armor stand is, and the game will automatically handle the rest. Okay, so I've gotten all of the obstacles to work except for the first one. So it'll generate a random cactus, and then we can jump over that cactus. And all of this works pretty well, surprisingly, but we still do have one issue, which is that the dinosaur can't actually get over the cacti. He's kind of like can't jump high enough or far enough to get over it. And I think this is because in the actual dino game, he moves a lot faster relative to his own body length. So all I'm gonna do is just increase his speed so that he can hopefully get over all the cacti. Okay, I've upped the speed by quite a bit, and whoa, that is way too fast. So basically what happened there is that the slimes that are pushing our player across basically just went so fast they couldn't even push the player, so they ended up just zooming off into the distance. But I think this might even be a little bit too fast. You know what, this seems pretty good. I think I'm happy with this. And the speed will gradually increase as the game gets faster. We just have to summon more slimes that are pushing us so that there's more power behind us getting pushed. Okay, there should now be 4 slimes instead of just 1, and it's still moving a bit too fast, but I want to try one more thing. If I move with the dinosaur, then can I kind of like get into the groove, and then once I'm going, there we go, yeah, now I'm being pushed along. So now we have to work on the next step, which is adding in all of the different things that happen as the game gets longer. So coming back over to our board of progress, the 3 main things that we're going to need to focus on are birds spawning as well as cacti, the speed increasing the farther you get along the track, and the day and night cycle of the dinosaur. And I'll explain each of these in more detail as we get to them, but let's start off with the birds spawning onto the track. So after you get to a certain point, it stops just becoming cactuses as obstacles, and it starts to also spawn in birds. And those are the little vultures represented by phantoms that we talked about earlier. Okay, so I'm just working on getting this implemented, but one problem that I can actually foresee myself coming into is that it's actually daytime in the world, and that means that the phantoms are going to burn. Now, I ideally want to avoid putting a line of blocks across the top like this, because that will cast a very slight shadow. So that's going to be the last resort, but there's another idea that I think could work. So to demonstrate, if I summon a zombie, he's obviously burning. But as most of you will know, if I summon the same zombie wearing a helmet, then of course he's not going to burn. Now, obviously, we can't put a helmet on a phantom, or can we? For example, if I put some Thorn's armor in this dispenser, and I give it all to a villager, you can hear the equip sound, and it's no longer there. And now if I go into survival, you can see that the villager is actually taking damage because I am getting damaged when I punch it. So if this exact same thing can work for phantoms, then maybe we can stop them from burning. So I'm just going to use my summon zombie command, but replace zombie with phantom. And let's see if this works. That's very unfortunate. Well, I guess we can just have a line of blocks across the top then. And that turned out to not be an issue because you literally can't tell a difference, so maybe I should have just done that from the start. Okay, this is just about the first test, so as soon as this value on the sidebar reaches 40,000, we should start seeing phantoms every so often. Alright, and now that we're there, we should see phantoms appear occasionally, so that "we" means that we should have gotten one. There we go. And the armor stand is still there, but yeah, that looks pretty perfect. So I think I do want to make them a little bit more common than this because this is only the second one I've gotten, and we are now at almost 75,000, so they're pretty uncommon. So I think I'm going to make them a little bit more common. There's another one. And then we can start adding in the height variation because currently they're all at ground level. And actually, maybe this is okay. Maybe I just got a little unlucky because here's a bunch. Okay, so there's a tall one, there's a medium one, and there's a short one. Okay, so the birds are done. Oh yeah, and I should probably mention that according to the Dinosaur Game Wiki, they're actually called pterodactyls, so my bad. So the next thing that we need to work on is the speed increase. So as we get farther and farther along, the speed of our dinosaur increases. And this means two things. Firstly, we have to make the dinosaur itself move faster. And secondly, we also need to space apart the obstacles differently. And to make sure that stuff doesn't get too out of hand, I'll definitely cap the speed at a certain value so that we aren't just zooming across the entire board in one tick. So I was just explaining to Stuart that I think the best way to do this is to have the dinosaur start at a slower speed that it's currently going because it is going quite fast. And then as we increase the speed, we can do some math to figure out how far apart spaced the obstacles should also be. Stuart, come on, we've been over this. Yeah, please look at me when I'm talking to you. Thank you. Honestly, creepers these days have no respect. Okay, so as our sidebar on the right gets bigger and bigger, the speed is now increasing. So you can see this 31 value right here is the dinosaur's speed, and it's going to continue increasing until it gets to 50, which is pretty much the maximum speed where it's feasible to be able to dodge the cacti. Now this increases by 1 every 5 seconds until it reaches 50, so it takes quite a while to get up to the max speed, but once you're there, it should be pretty good. So now we just need to space out the obstacles so that they get farther and farther apart the higher your speed is. Okay, and now that's all done. So the faster that we get, which will happen gradually, the obstacles will get spaced farther and farther apart, allowing us to jump over them with greater ease. So now that this one's done, we can focus on the last one, which is the day and night cycle. So after the game reaches a certain amount of time, the time will switch from day to night. But since the dinosaur game's day-night cycles are a lot faster than Minecraft's natural day-night cycles, I had to do some math and figure out that the correct multiplier was to speed up the Minecraft natural day-night cycle by 12 times. So here's what it looks like once I got it all working. Okay. I actually quite like that jittery thing that happens when it gets to nighttime. And okay, that's interesting. So the dinosaur looks quite bizarre at night, and I think, yeah, so this is because in the actual dinosaur game, the dinosaur inverts colors so that he is able to be seen better. Okay, here we go, and boom, now we have a white dinosaur which contrasts really nicely with our darker background. And I think white concrete powder was definitely the correct block to use for this because it resembles the dinosaur in the game super well. And now that it's becoming day again, let's see if it turns back. And there we go. Okay, so now that all 3 objectives are complete, we can work on making the obstacles actually functional, because currently, you can kind of just walk straight through them, and you can't really die at all. So this should be one of the last things that we have to do before I can call this game fully complete. So we already have most of the actual death system set up from the Flappy Bird video, which is basically just to stop the player to make sure that they don't keep moving. But that does take a pretty big chunk of the work off, so all I should have to do now is do the death detection system, not the actual death activation system. Okay, so our dino game is very difficult, but definitely playable. playable. So we can jump over all the cacti, but it's very easy to get caught on ledges where it kind of feels like you shouldn't have gotten caught. But this just turned out to be a remnant from when the dinosaur was a Flappy Bird. Because the center was misaligned, the distance to the nearest obstacle was way off. So one final thing that I'm going to add is just a little comedic effect, which is to make the dinosaur's eyes get really, really big whenever he died, which is something that it does in the actual game. And this might be a little bit too big, but I'm doing it anyway because it's hilarious. So all this should involve is marking these 6 eye blocks with something unique, and then whenever the dinosaur dies, we can just kill them, leaving us with a big gaping hole like that. Okay, first test. That is... okay, I forgot to... That's perfect, I just forgot to teleport them down instead of killing them, so they just kind of died, but that's... yes, that's exactly what we want. Let me fix that really quick. Okay, this should be a lot better. Oh. And at last, there we go. This is working absolutely beautifully. So the last step is just to add in a scoring system, and let's get some friends to play it. But even though things started off pretty normal, they took a turn for the south very fast. What?
Considered adding a way to like not do that.
I did that! I did, it just broke. Just don't abuse. Just play the game normally. No. Okay. No. You might wanna...
It was falling back.